Welcome to the Digital Remodeler podcast. We are so glad you've chosen to join us today. And with me again is Rich Tygett from IC Insurance Solutions. Thank you for joining us today, Rich.
Thanks for having me, Carl. Great to be here.
Hey, Rich. So last time you were on, you left a parting comment talking about subcontractor risk. And that's what we're going to dive into today. And obviously, you bringing that up, you said you could talk for a long time on this topic.
Definitely.
And so we're gonna get into this, and it's something you mentioned as you were leaving. You said it's something that a lot of contractors just absolutely overlook, and so that's I think the diving board we're going to jump off of today. So let's kind of frame this a little bit. When something goes wrong on a job site and it involves a subcontractor, where does that liability usually land versus where does the contractor generally, and I'm gonna use that dangerous word, assume
Okay.
it lands?
Yeah, the assumption is the mother of all errors, right? So commonly we work with a general contractor and he's working with subs. He's got the subs doing a majority of the work on the project. He's a paper contractor, maybe. So the situation arises where a lot of contractors would love to call everybody they bring on the job site a W-9. However they want to refer to as a sub, but they do everything but the three things that are most imperative when distancing yourself from these subs. So ultimately, the contractor, the general contractor, the prime contractor on the job site can find himself with the liability of the sub if he doesn't properly schedule the subcontractors. So there are a few different things to do to make sure to distance yourself from those subs. They should be autonomous. They should have their own tools. They should be licensed. They should be able to perform without being under anybody's directive.
That's good. So let's talk about this because I really want to make sure we get clarity on that. So you use the word autonomous. Let's really define that word autonomous because
Yeah.
I think again there can be a lot of assumptions as to what autonomous means. So when you say autonomous, what does autonomous mean to you versus what it might mean in the mind of the contractor?
Autonomous, hands off. This person should know what to do on their own. And in the situation of hiring a sub, you're hiring someone who has the skill set to do this particular job. So with the with that type of a professional at your job site, there should be no communication. So in the subcontractor contract itself from the prime contractor, the downstream contract to the sub, it should basically just describe what the work is, when it starts, how much you're getting paid, and when you need to be done with it.
That's good. And when we talk about, the risk that comes along in these relationships, what would you say is the biggest misconception you see that contractors have about subs and the risk that comes along in that relationship?
Well, again, I think that a lot of the contractors who are not properly weaned or don't understand the proper risk transfer will do anything they can to get the sub on the job site to do the work, but they want to distance that person as much as they can from themselves. And there is a certain set of criteria. There are three things that distance that subcontractor from the contractor. The primary one is the subcontractor contract. So the autonomy lies in the fact that you can have a contract, you can take a contract, and then the parties don't need to communicate. The second is you want to have proper risk transfer from those subs. Those subs should carry the same insurance that you're required to carry for a job or what you command, what a prime contractor or a general contractor's attorney may tell them to always get from a sub. And then the third principle, the third primary way to separate yourself from a sub is that that person is They're self-employed. They've taken on the burden of self-employment. And in many states, they need to be licensed for the work they do. So those three factors, the contract, the subcontractor agreement, the insurance risk transfer, and the fact that you're using a professional who, in more than likely, in most cases, in most states, is a licensed professional.
Hmm, that's good. I think, Rich, one of the things that you've probably seen, heard, or come across is uh, I've seen too many contractors who just even I'm going to call it the basics, don't even have some kind of documentation in place in those.
Nothing. Yeah, there's
Yeah,
nothing but a handshake in a lot of cases. Um, so unfortunately, if there's a problem down the road, there's nothing holding that subcontractor to the agreement or to the responsibility of the project. So that general contractor who brought that sub on essentially is going to be stuck holding the bag with any problems that might arise.
yeah. So you mentioned that, the subcontractor is autonomous. So because they're autonomous, what does that really mean from a risk standpoint? What does that do with that risk?
I think it leaves it wide open, essentially,
Yeah,
without proper
explain that a little
protocol.
bit.
Well, the fact that the contractor invites this person onto the site, there could be calamity. There could be chaos. Fire can ensue and endless problems that can arise from this individual or this group that you've hired to come on and represent you. So I think also a lot of contractors just don't know the proper risk transfer, and it takes time, right, to learn things. I need to hear it 3 times, touch it, have someone explain it to me, and then I start to get the gist. So in a lot of cases, it's just a matter of ignorance, unfortunately. We just don't know how to properly use these subs. It's
Yeah,
different than hiring an employee. And essentially, if you don't have those protocols, those three facets in place, it's you are essentially taking on employment. You're hiring these people, and if there's injury from the sub or one of their employees or damage, you're basically you've got a blank check you're writing. You don't know what the potential chaos could be that could ensue, but you're going to pay for it. You're on the
yeah,
hook.
yeah. And you keep using this word, and I want to bring this term back in, and that term is risk transfer. And
Yes.
let's explain why just having autonomy doesn't transfer the risk.
Well, commonly the risk itself is a financial relationship between that subcontractor and an insuring party. So that's where the guarantee is going to come from. The fact that that person has this insurance in place, and that's not the full gamut of what needs to occur. The sub needs to give this insurance in favor of the prime, the upstream contractor. So in I would say in just a matter of starting business, getting established, it just takes time to pick up the uh, the different qualities of separating yourself from the sub. So the risk transfer is one of the biggest ones, but without the other instruments in play, it can still leave you open.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the common gaps that get missed and get overlooked. So when you look at claims or issues, what are some of the most common things that contractors just simply didn't have in place?
Well, there's another layer to this, and it's audits. So a prime contractor has an obligation to his insurance carrier also. And if they see he's using subs, they can ask for proof of this proper risk transfer. And in lieu of that, you're going to get hit with an audit premium. So higher cost. Essentially, they'll make these people charge you under a classification of perhaps employee payroll. even though you really wanted them to be your sub and you paid them handsomely, but you don't have the proper risk transfer. You don't have the three parts that make the risk transfer complete: the subcontractor contract, the insurance risk transfer, and using a party who is licensed and taking on the burden of self-employment, has their own tools, has their own employees. They can hire and fire their people at will. They can take other jobs. And unfortunately, without the right risk transfer, you can get caught in a monetary type penalty where you have to pay more for your insurance expenses, unexpected expenses. And then the worst part is if there is calamity, damage, fire, property damage, bodily injury, because you're also picking that up.
Mm. Well, let's talk about, vetting your subs. What should the contractor be verifying before they ever bring on a subcontractor?
You know, it's funny because instantly I hear a lot of guys say, my friend is the sub, we're going to use the sub. So um, I'm not sure exactly, other than reputation and historic relationships. I think those would probably be the primary drivers of how a general would vet a sub. But there could also be, like, we have high-end contractors who do incredible structures, beautiful homes, and the experience that you need to bring in to do this sort of work has to be a proven track record. So perhaps the other source is the resume of the sub, just looking at the projects that they've been able to accomplish and what is the quality or level of the work that they perform. But commonly it's a friendship, and a lot of them, man, like Texas, they'll tell me pretty much from the start that we don't do risk transfer, we don't do contracts, we take their insurance, but that's it. We work on a handshake, and that only goes so far. Friendship only goes so far before it's a conflict of interest. Unfortunately, in business or in the court of law, when there's problems, the friendship is just the last. It's just not important any longer when you're in a conflict of interest with your friend.
Yeah. Have you ever seen a situation where, the coverage limits didn't match and that gap created a problem between the sub and the
I've
contractor?
read I've read a lot about it, and unfortunately, we have not had that type of a situation. The one thing that especially in the first years of my career helping contractors, is I didn't know how to properly, and vet them in my own way, but to be sure that when they use those subs, they're doing it properly. So unfortunately, I've seen guys get bit from using subs who we just didn't have those three criteria in place. Any one of those, the subcontractor contract, having a risk transfer, proper certificate of liability, and then proper licensing for that sub. Any one of those three factors falls through and they become your employee by default. I mean, on the flip side is, let's say somebody gets injured and you really wanted them to be your sub, but you don't have one of those three facets, and every attorney knows that, and they're going to hammer you. So now you're paying this injury claim where you wanted them to be your sub, but by default, you have a missing piece of the puzzle in your risk transfer, and this is not your sub. This is now your employee, and you're going
Yeah.
to, pay out of your pocket for it. So I've seen that. I've seen the audits, and so I self-corrected. I was so excited. One of the first clients it happened to was from Texas. They were over 100 years old, the company, third generation, and I was shocked when the first year went by and they got their audit, and all, the subs, the subs didn't have the proper risk transfer. So all of a sudden our premium was 3 or 4 times. I lost the client.
Yeah.
Hard learning lessons.
Yeah.
And both of our, on both of our behalves. And to me, it's almost shocking that a sub wouldn't know how to use, or how a general contractor or any contractor wouldn't know how to use that sub properly. So
Yeah.
it was eye-opening for me, just the fact that here we have this company been doing business over 100 years in Texas, and they didn't know. So
Yeah.
it can happen quick. And there's just these simple rules. To me, it's second nature, but to the next guy I talk to on the phone, he doesn't know about that. So I bring it up. Sometimes I shoot myself in the foot, and I'm the nice guy, Carl, and I finish last. You know, so
Sure.
I lose customers because I already care about them before we even do business, because I have this prudence that I work from. So
Yeah.
it follows me everywhere I go. I can't get rid of it, Carl. I can't
That's a good
shake it.
thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah. Yep.
So let's talk about the importance of, being listed as an additional insured and what the real ramifications can be when that doesn't happen, how costly that can be when, even something as simple as making that designation doesn't take place.
It's a call for bankruptcy. It's the worst. We share this risk amongst the insurers because not any one of these contractors can handle a claim. So just the legalities, just hiring an attorney to help you fight these things is enough to bury most people. So the bankruptcy is the obvious route when you don't have the ability, the financial wherewithal to keep moving forward. You duck and cover and do a BK.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the details that really matter. A lot of guys collect a certificate of insurance and just move on. But what are they actually missing?
Well, could you rephrase that?
Well, a lot of guys just think that's just it. You just get the certificate of insurance, and once you got that, you're good. And
Makes me want
oh,
to reiterate the 3 points,
yeah,
because you're right. Now I've got my certificate. He's a sub. We're good to go.
yep,
And unfortunately, in lieu of confirming that they're licensed in their trade, or the fact that you have the subcontractor agreement in place, these are where the legalities arise. Just having the piece of paper saying that you have the insurance, that you've been afforded this coverage, is one part of it. But the carriers, there's so many other, what are good examples? There are other gaps. If you just collected one of the three pillars that protect you, you've left yourself exposed. Um, the subcontractor agreement itself has limitations from that sub to the general. So you want to limit as much damage as possible from a claim coming back on you. So now all that verbiage is gone. And then you don't know if this person is licensed in their trade. You haven't collected the third part of the pillars, which proves that that entity has its own credentials, and their the governing body in the state has authorized them to do business.
mm, yeah, that's good. And let's talk, even a little deeper. Where do things like commercial auto or workers' comp come into play that you might not even be thinking about? You might just overlook.
In fact, that's with meeting new clients, we call that the core coverage: general liability, commercial auto, and workers' comp. So those three coverages are what is commonly requested by a contractor's attorney when they're helping you to mitigate risk. So having commercial auto and workers' comp um, appear on the certificate of liability is simply just fully encompassing. There's so much that can happen. It's not just an employee at a job site working in the structure's up now and he gets hurt somewhere inside. But what about somebody backs into property, tips over property, breaks something, hurts somebody? So that's the commercial auto aspect of it. So workers' comp, general liability, commercial auto is the core coverage. So getting one of the three, it's just another exposure. It's huge exposures. Each line of business for insurance is offered to cover the gaps that each policy leaves behind. After they hang all the conditions and exclusions on the perfectly good policy, it's very narrow and limited. So, you know, a general liability policy excludes employment practices, it excludes employee injuries. So that's the workers' comp. Of course, they exclude equipment. I mean, anything other than exposure at that job site. You don't have coverage for vehicles damage on the road away from your job site unless you have that particular coverage in force. So it's just another facet of learning the proper risk transfer. And like I say, it's once you hear it or see it 2 or 3 times, it becomes second nature. Just like I can roll it out, the contractor can roll it out.
That's good. So let's talk about systems versus these one-off checks. Um, you know, as we're talking, you know, what you're talking about, the 3 pillars, is really more than just paperwork. It really is a system and a solid process for managing subcontractor insurance and more importantly, managing risk. And so how do you really make sure that your system is always functioning properly? What's just a good way to keep your, you know, just as with any other system, just a good system check process. How
It
do
is
you?
a Yeah, it's a T filing system. I think what you're asking is when we have a contractor and they use, let's say, again, he's a paper contractor. So the majority of the work that gets completed for this contractor occurs through subs.
Mhm.
So the T file system is what I recommend. And it's not just one file for each sub, because now we have 3 lines of insurance that we've just discussed. The core, so you have 3 different renewal dates. And so I teach them, I show them how to properly separate these files out. You don't just want to pull general liability when it renews. You need 3 files for each contractor if they've got 3 lines of insurance. And let's throw excess liability in there. Now you've got a 4th line you're following up on, even though it's the same renewal date as your general liability, it follows general liability. You've got checks and balances. So how do you realize, okay, I've just seen general liability, but then you've got a checkbox for excess too. Excess has to come through. Now I've got a different month for commercial auto. So in that file needs to be renewed. They need a new certificate. And then so at some point, how do you know you've actually received each of these insurances? So now you've got an even deeper follow-up issue. And I don't know, a lot of people have management systems that will offer reminders. So now you've asked the sub, hey, your renewal's coming up. We're a month before it. And now you need to go back and follow up again, make sure you get it. So it's a very detail-oriented system. And there are gaps which can appear instantly just by neglecting a certain line of business or or requesting they provide their insurance altogether. Commonly, the subs aren't just offering what you need. You need to be chasing it down.
Yeah, that and let's be honest, what happens when certificates expire or don't get tracked properly?
Yeah.
Creates
Things fall
chaos.
things fall through the cracks. Yes.
Yeah.
And policies cancel in the middle of the year. So you have a monitoring system. You need to check your email every day. And if You get an email from another broker who says, hey, this guy missed his installment. We show a cancellation occurring within 30 days. Can you, um, you need to, I'm sorry, I got the phone ringing here. I should have put them on night mode. I can't, I just absolutely can't think when that's going on.
Sure.
Where was I at, Carl?
So we were talking about, here you are mid-project and certificates start expiring because they're not tracked properly. What happens?
Yeah. Yeah, it can be a real challenge to keep up on the requirements that you need to always have on hand when you use the sub.
Yeah. Now your risk is you're exposed again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And keeping up on that exposure is endless. It really is, especially for my guys who use 6, 8 different subs on each project. And so now imagine each of those 8 subs has 3 lines of insurance. So you have 24 points through the year that you have to reach out and say, I need something. 24 more points where you need to follow up, make sure you get it. So
Yeah.
that asking a lot. So having a good system in place and reminders coming up until you clear and turn off those reminders, they're screaming at you. So I mean, any given month, I would imagine there are 3 to 5 lines of business that these contractors are following up on.
Mm.
So it can be time consuming and frustrating. I mean, put it all into one ball of wax. It's more work.
Yeah. So you've talked before about builder's risk is no fault coverage. What does that really mean in real life terms on a project?
Oh yeah, no fault is the best because now here we are, we're all working toward, I say we all, here's a contractor and his subs all working toward one common goal, it's completion of the project. So the the no risk falls in the fact that let's say our plumber is sweating some pipes and he leaves. We come back the next morning and there's a pile of rubble and we're talking to the fire marshal. Well, the course of construction is going to step in. They're not looking for blame. There'll be an investigation, but they're not going to come back and subrogate and sue your sub who is at fault for, who is found to be the culprit for the problem. But there's no repercussions back on that individual, and the project doesn't get held up. The claim is paid, the job is put back on track, and that same sub can return and complete work again. So there's the no fault lay in the fact that it's a policy that just wants to get you corrected and get you back to where you were before the problem began.
Yeah, that's good. So really what that does is, when you're mid-build and damage occurs, it just gets you back on task quicker.
Yep. And that's why I like to write. I like to have our general contractors carry the course of construction rather than the project owner. And the simple facts are that when there is a claim and that project owner is on vacation, we're not waiting on that person to make decisions or get in contact with us. Our contractor who owns the job site, who's responsible for the job site, is going to be indemnified and we're going to be back on track immediately. There's no long delays. Time is money.
Good. So let's talk about contracts and shifting the liability. Are you seeing contracts today push more liability onto contractors than it did in the past?
Yes. So there are different ways that the contract itself can penalize the contractor. And typically what we're seeing is through insurance requirements. If the client deems that the requirements are not satisfactory when the first draw comes up or however payments work, I've seen 30% penalty things to this effect, which are large chunks when you're expecting a draw and you have a 30% lower take on that, that'd be devastating.
Yeah.
So there are several ways through different states. I see different contracts, and commonly tort law, which is how problems in different states have played out in court. So tort law is outcomes of different previous court cases. And commonly, like California, for example, tort law will trump a subcontractor's contract. So you could even have a homeowner give you a contract and says, hey, if you don't get the job done by April 1st, we want a trip to the moon. And well, we don't have the ability to send you to the moon. So that type of a contract requirement doesn't hold up under tort law, right? So you can put whatever you want in the contract, but only what the laws in those states will allow is the extent of the contract. So in lieu of a contract, tort law will prevail. And tort law also will dictate in a contract what is essentially acceptable or what is just jargon or too much information or just not something not realistic, we should say.
Okay. And where do you find, as you're seeing kind of that shift, where are contractors getting caught off guard in those agreements?
Well, I think that there's just such a large amount of information that a upstream contract is shoving down to the downstream contractor. It's I don't have a clear example of where the risk lay or why there is more risk. But what I've seen is more and more is that the upstream contracts are trying to push any issue they can down to the lower tier contractors. And in a lot of cases, it just doesn't hold weight.
Yeah. And along those lines, as we're talking about agreements and the upstream and downstream, uh, how important is it for the contractor to keep those subcontractor agreements updated? I know the tendency is a lot of times contractors got this agreement, it's been in their filing cabinet, they've used it for years, probably haven't looked at it for years, haven't had an attorney review it for years. How important is it really to keep those things updated and fresh?
Well, it's definitely good for an attorney to review a contractor's contracts. You have an upstream contract that you would give to your client, and you have a downstream contract you would give to your subs. So the so I kind of lost my train of thought. What's
Yeah.
your
So
question on that?
yeah. So how fresh should they be keeping those?
Uh,
Should they
the
be
the
having those
main
reviewed on a regular basis?
Yeah, there is one main portion of the sub agreements which should be in each one, and that's the indemnity agreement. Whereas you're hiring a subcontractor, and the indemnity agreement between them is that they're going to be responsible for their problems. You don't want to share in the risk when they create a problem, even if a portion of the challenge was shared by you, you don't want to participate in it. So in a contract, it sounds great, but by the time it might hit a court, the judge is going to be the one to determine how that actually plays out.
Yeah, that's good. And let's talk about a couple of practical things here. If somebody is listening to our podcast today or they're watching and they realize they've got some gaps, what are the first two or three things they should fix?
You mean in their contract?
Yeah.
Yeah. So commonly the attorneys for each state are the first stop on that shop. Let them review it. Let them come back and provide you what they consider is updated. and appropriate. So the I think the attorney, I mean, because these are legal instruments, documents. So the attorney definitely is the stop, and let them create it for you. We have a sample that we offer, and it's one that's accepted. Um, it's it's it has the appropriate language for this for the different states. And then we advise that you can modify it for your company, but we always recommend they have an attorney design it specifically for them. Um, the one thing that is not always out in the open is when I work with an affluent client. So the contractor has a large financial net worth. Um, the attorneys are the best spot for their protection. And, even aside from the contract, the attorney would do a portion of what my job is too, is determining how much coverage might be appropriate for this person. So even though the general liability, commercial auto, workers' comp has a standard, or some lines of business or statutory limits of insurance at 1 million, it might sound like a lot, but when there's problems, it's very small. It's a very small amount. So someone who has something to lose on the other end probably would want and be advised to carry more millions, more X coverages of millions of dollars, and excess liability up and over their standard coverages. So that's another good reason to have a contract reviewed by an attorney or professional.
That's good. Beyond just the contract side of things, Rich, is somebody's been listening to us. They're listening to the three pillars, and they go, "Well, I'm not even sure if I have three of them in place.
Yeah, yeah.
Where should they start?"
They should call their broker and ask for help with the broker. And if the broker doesn't know what to do or has to go seek information, you need a new broker.
Good, good. And then just some closing thoughts here. At the end of the day, is this an insurance issue or a business discipline issue?
What portion of it? The three pillar?
Well, when we talk about really getting your subs in order and getting your processes in order, getting your three pillars in order, or is this an insurance issue, or is this a business discipline issue, or is it
I
both?
think it's like a moral business discipline issue. You need to protect. What are you going to do to protect yourself? What are the common facets people use to protect themselves in these situations? So, yeah, a little self-reflection at that point.
Yeah. And Rich, you've been doing this for 20 plus years now. So you've seen a lot of contractors in your time. So what separates the contractor who manages risk well from the ones who eventually get burned?
I would imagine profitability and longevity are good ways to describe that person who's trying to be responsible and do the right things.
Yeah.
He's not going to get bit. Sometimes it does take more to do the business in this proper manner. Follow-ups, phone calls, and being persistent to get what you want on your end. So I imagine the contractors themselves, uh, I don't know where I'm at on this one, Carl.
Well, you said something telling, and I'm gonna draw it out for the audience. Uh, you made mention of the clients you worked with and you do work with, who are super successful, who have a lot to lose, surround themselves with the right team.
Definitely.
They are the ones that work with the attorney. They are the ones that work with the broker. They are the ones that don't just get a little bit of insurance. They protect what they've worked hard to build. And I think that may have been, whether you realize it or not, the most valuable thing you said today. So to our people listening, you have to decide, what are you building and who are you building it for, and is it worth protecting? And I think that's maybe the most valuable thing you brought out today is those who are building something significant will take the time and the effort to protect what they're building.
Yeah, and
And
longevity as well. So you're going to protect your not only the projects and structures you're creating, but your business, your length of time in business, staying profitable, keeping away from the snags, staying out of
excellent.
the fray.
Excellent. Yeah, and Rich, for anyone in our audience that wants to know more about you, wants to know more about IC Insurance Solutions and how you can be of help, how can they reach out to you?
Call my cell phone, text me anytime. Area code 916-224-2270.
Perfect. And Rich alluded to it, but his real specialization are the states of California and Texas. And if you are a contractor in either one of those states, he is very well versed in those states and the nuances of what you have to work with there. So reach out to Rich. And Rich, thank you for joining us today. And to our audience, thanks for tuning in.
Thank you, Carl. It's great being with you.
Thank you.
Have a good one.